not able to. So they make your digestion more efficient. But also, the #1 way that you are exposed to disease is your gut. Like, we think of it as our skin, but our skin is actually really resistant to penetration, okay? Your gut and your lungs are meant to absorb stuff. So basically most of your immune system cells lie perched immediately around your gut. And it's because if something comes in that's inappropriate for your biology, it can launch an attack immediately before it systemically infects you. Well, here's where the probiotics come in. It turns out that because your gut is like this constant flow of stuff, your body doesn't try to stop the flow because otherwise it would starve. Instead, what your body does is it allows a flow but has a filter called an immune system that attacks the bad stuff and lets the good stuff through. And what's in the gut is constantly communicating with what's on the other side of the gut, the attackers that would the parts of your immune system. So if you get, say, systemic Candida, where you have no bacteria in your gut anymore, you're full of yeast, your immune system knows there's trouble, and it starts to react, and there's all these inflammatory disorders that are related to things like inappropriate gut ecosystems. And it's just because your gut is entirely trained by and maintained by the stuff that's in it. Your immune system is maintained by and trained by the stuff that's in the gut. So it's really important. Another thing, you have so many nerves around your gut, they call it your gut brain. So you've got a brain up here, obviously, but you have a whole lot of nerves. Literally the ganglion equivalent of a cat brain is around your internal intestines.
Listen to your gut.
And they're listening. It's carefully monitoring. And so oftentimes it's thought that even things like depression or anxiety, things like that, can be traced back to a disharmony in the gut ecosystem. It's one hypothesis, but it's one that I subscribe to because I've seen myself with the bad gut and with the good gut, and it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference. So the value of the kombucha, the sauerkraut, and the kefir is that the kefir itself is a probiotic organism. So it literally contains the transient organisms that will pass through your gut that are the good communicators with your immune system. The sauerkraut doesn't have very much alive in it anymore. It's become so acidic that it's pretty much preserved. That's why it won't rot. But it's so acidic, it provides a really safe habitat for probiotic bacteria. So the kinds of bacteria that you want in your gut, if you're drinking kombucha and eating sauerkraut, they call those two beverages prebiotics because they form a biotic situation that is appropriate for probiotic organisms. So probiotic organisms live there, but that's the soil for them.
Do they come and go? Do they come and leave?
Yes.
And then you have to rebuild?
Yeah, every 2 weeks you end up passing these things through. So the only one that's not transient is called Lactobacillus acidophilus, and it actually has the ability to bind to your intestine and live there. But all the rest of the good ones, you pass through. So it's important to dose yourself frequently with it. Anytime you take an antibiotic, definitely take probiotics. And it's something that my parents weren't aware of when I was a child. I had all sorts of pneumonia and stuff that I was just completely dosed with antibiotics, and it saved my life. But what should have happened is they should have repleted the biome immediately with probiotics. And instead they didn't. And in our culture, we eat so much sugar that I ended up developing a lot of problems with, I guess, what you call Candida. Too much sugar. Candida is not a bacteria; it's a fungus, and so antibiotics don't kill it. So you clean out your system of bacteria. What's left is the fungi. You feed it with an overly sugary diet, and it proliferates. And you can get conditions like thrush or just systemic gut biome problems. The last thing I'll mention just about the whole gut biome thing that you'll find fascinating is it turns out that one of the reasons we chlorinated the water and that in Europe they ozonate the water is because they've been trying to get rid of cryptosporidium, salmonella, E. coli, things that could infect you with food poisoning type sicknesses. the problem that manifested when we did that is it turns out some of the organisms that actually are in the environment are good for us. And
along with ozonating? Or
anytime you kill, ozonating is definitely safer than chlorinating. But both of them destroy everything in the water. So basically, it turns out that human beings, most things like Giardia, most protists, there are many parasitic things that you don't want to be drinking. And that's actually one of the safe things about drinking kombucha is it's acidic enough that there's nothing alive in it pretty much once you've drunk it. Or at least the stuff that is alive isn't the dangerous stuff. Well, I learned in my research that it turns out there are many things that we got rid of in the water when we started chlorinating or ozonating in it that it's good that we got rid of. But there's a couple of things, it turns out, are actually part of our gut biome that they're like the baby that we threw out with the bathwater when we were trying to solve that problem. And it turns out that human hookworm is an interesting organism in that in large numbers it causes anemia in people, and 500 million people worldwide have anemia, and it's a terrible disease because they basically have these worms that are sucking too much blood. But it turns out that people who are infected with hookworm don't have autoimmune issues. And it's really interesting. Like things like lupus and Crohn's disease and asthma and allergies, those sorts of things. They've noticed that these people don't have autoimmunity, or if they do, it's like really reduced cases of it. Not very many, not very serious. And so I started looking into it. I was interested in that phenomenon simply because what I was dying of was autoimmune problems. Well, long story short, I ended up learning that if you have a mild infection of human hookworm, you can virtually reverse autoimmune problems.
So then having your probiotics in order is what's important for keeping the hookworm in check?
What's important with the hookworm is that what's cool about it is that it cannot reproduce inside of you. It can't recruit babies inside of you. So like if you had 5 hookworm, you would have 5 hookworm until they died of old age, like 5 years later. And so with the hookworm, you want to have the right dose. You need to have a dose that is a large enough number of them that they actually are training your immune system the way good probiotic organisms do. And they do it very well because your body recognizes them as an infection, and for the first 70 or 100 days that you have that infection, you have mild diarrhea, things like that. But what the hookworm eventually does is it negotiates with your immune system. It says, look, I'm here, don't kill me. I'm not interested in killing you, I'm just interested in some of your blood. Because remember, if a hookworm dies because you died, then all of its potential kids are dead too. So it turns out that if you have an infection of hookworm between 0 and 300, you actually have amazing immunomodulatory effects without the anemia. Something like 300 hookworm would remove about as much blood from your system as a woman loses every month in a menstrual cycle. So it's not that much blood. It's something that your body can replenish. So anyway, I ended up having to leave the country and do this. It's called Helminthic Therapy. I'm currently hosting, I have 83 of them. And they're amazing in what they do. They're not the only thing that I do, but I noticed 70 days into my infection that I wasn't able to sneeze anymore. Like pollen would get in my nose, and I'd have one of these sneezes that would start, and then it just would stop. The sneeze response wasn't there. And I noticed I became a lot more tolerant of food that I'm allergic to. So that's one of the things that has been very helpful.
So it suppresses the histamine response?
What it does is it increases the T regulatory cells in your body. And one of the things that's happened in modern society is different branches of our immune system have become too populated, like the Th1 cells and the Th2 cells, but the other one is depleted. So there's an imbalance going on. but also because we have such inflammatory diets, and that's something I'm going to teach about when we do our ancestral stuff. Inflammatory diets like cause the depletion of T regulatory cells because you're constantly in a state of aggression, immunological aggression. So what's happening with the hookworms is they're currently trying to work it out. It's not an FDA approved thing. I had to leave the country to do it. But the bottom line is it's increasing T regulatory cells and doing several other things locally in your intestine and systemically throughout your body that helps regulate your immune system.
So just by virtue of them being there, the body recognizes that it needs to up its immune system in a certain regard?
What happens is the hookworms are telling your body to upregulate the T regulatory cells so that your body doesn't have quite as sharp an attack against them.
Bizarre.
Isn't that neat? So, and it doesn't like destroy your immune system because like if I had AIDS, I would die, right? Like those hookworms definitely want your immune system running at 100%. But for people that's immune system that was running sloppily and maybe at 110, 120, 130, 140%, it's unhealthy long term because you can end up with rheumatoid arthritis or multiple sclerosis, or in my case, just food allergies galore. Yeah, so I do something called Helminthic Therapy, and if you Google it, there's a lot of information on it. So that's something that is also associated with the probiotics. And with Helminthic Therapy, it's so permaculture-y because, number one, all you're doing is you're letting an organism do the work for you to make your body run the way it's supposed to run. But as in permaculture, it's all about stacking and stocking. If you have too much of one thing, it's a problem. If you have too little of one thing, it's a problem. If you have the right amount, then you have balance. So that's very interesting, I think, from a perspective, is like you have to think of your body as an ecosystem, not as an organism.
Right.
So that's been helpful for me. And another interesting thing is that if I were to take antibiotics, the hookworms would stop working for about 6 weeks. It takes 6 weeks for them to come online. So there is something, I think, symbiotic between the hookworms and the probiotic bacteria.
Interesting.
Like
so it's not a direct connection with the body, it's what they're doing together that's affecting the body?
I don't think it's the antibiotic hurting the hookworm. I think it's hurting the bacteria that the hookworm rely upon. I think.
It's taking away.
Yeah. So it's really interesting how all of this works. And the way the dosing goes, there's a company that does this. It's called Autoimmune Therapies. They're based out of England. And they recommend that you dose a little bit every 6 months or so that by the end of the 5 years, which is the life cycle of the hookworm, half of your population is young, and then half is geriatric and old and dying, so that you can sort of maintain. It's like walking on a treadmill. You can maintain, between 50 and 300 of these hookworms.
Wow.
But yeah.
So once you go past that, it's kind of over the
Yeah, like if
system.
yeah, it would. They would start to drink some that you wouldn't have any allergies, but you'd be anemic. Like your immune system would be completely tamed, but you'd be losing like 2 or 3 times the amount of blood that a woman loses per month.
And how would you handle that to reduce that population? Can you?
The only way to reduce the population, there's 2 ways. You can just ride it out and let them die over the course of 5 years, or you can kill them today by taking a worm pill.
Oh.
So then you just have to start over.
Yeah. So, like, if you were a biologist doing this, what you would do is you take some of your stool where the eggs are, and you put it in conditions that culture the baby ones. Then you take the worm pill, and then you'd hope that your culture skills were good so that you get some more of the babies out, and then you would redose with exactly the number that you need.
And dose through the skin, right?
Yeah, I dose. This is where about 2 months ago. That's where I put them in. So what they do is they crawl into your skin, and they ride in your veins to your lungs. And then they bore into your lungs, and they ride up the mucociliary escalator, like the mucus train, up into your throat, and you're constantly swallowing spit. They get down in your stomach. They have these amazing enzymes on their surface that allow them to evade being eaten up by the stomach acid. Then once they make it into your intestines, they spend about 20, 21 days eating your food. growing from the size of microscopic